Hello, everyone. Zerkalda back again with another episode where we will be continuing the series I started, going over the Rings of Power's terrible dialogue and the selections I made while watching each episode of season one. This is now episode two, which is the shortest with only 2 pages of dialogue recorded down. But make no mistake, the dialogue is not shorter because of a jump in quality. It's simply because this episode, more than any other, struggled to hold my attention. And I was very lenient with this episode. There's very likely more dialogue that could be taken off and put down on this list, but I simply chose not to because there's so much already overall. But we're going to get into the second episode, and the first line came from the Harfoot Nori, where she commented on as she's falling into the crater left by Methdolf, and she comments that it's not hot. Inherently, there's nothing wrong with it. However, this acknowledgement breaks the logic of the world because, if you'll recall, in episode 1, Galadriel made the comment that the fortress was so evil that fire gave no warmth. And here, this is why it was that line of dialogue was put in, because they are trying to create a red herring regarding Methdolf, that it might be Sauron. Ooh. And this is how they're trying to do it. This is the first seed they try to do, next to the fact that the crater, for some reason, is the eye of Sauron. But the moment you realize this is supposed to be Gandalf, but it's Methdolf, this logic falls apart, because then why is the fire not hot if that's what evil does? It makes no sense. Same reason for why is it in the eye of the Sauron? That's it. Oh, it's just a coincidence, and then here it's a second coincidence that yeah, it's just something that happens to make it look like he's maybe evil or maybe not. We don't know. It's purely here for the meta narrative. It has no in-universe justification whatsoever. Second line of dialogue I recorded down was also from Nori, where she's going back and forth with Poppy over whether or not they should tell the crones about Methdolf's arrival, and there was more to this conversation, but I only highlighted one sentence, which was from Nori saying, "You're not telling her, neither am I. Quick sticks." I still, after 2 seasons, have no idea what quick sticks is supposed to mean. It's not elaborated on in context what the phrase is supposed to mean. Is it supposed to mean I'm gonna move quickly? Because what quick sticks, that doesn't fall track. Then is it wait here? That's not what it is either. No, it quick sticks. Because these two, it honestly reminded me of Bionicle a bit when the original Mata storyline, where the Matoran would use things like wind fly, the tree speak. Only at least with tree speak, they combined the adjectives and words that made sense. Quick sticks are two things that have no correlation whatsoever. And it feels like another one of these things where they're just trying to insert what they think is fantasy dialogue, because it's, well, fantasy don't use our normal words. They make up their own words. And they just made this up. There's no context. It's just really stupid. And it just took me right out of it. The next line of dialogue is also from Nori. And this one is here because it's the irony to it. Because Nori says, "We can't leave him for the wolves. That's not who we are." Anyone who knows what the Harfoots are about knows that in this show, knows that's exactly who they are. And it's funny, Poppy even will comment, "Oh, that's not who you are," calling Nori out. So, but the fact that Nori can't seem to recognize that, yeah, leaving him for the wolves is exactly what the Harfoots do, despite her growing up in them. But then, of course, that would then also beg the question, why is she different then? What makes her different? To which There is no answer. She just is. Which, again, if you've seen episode 1, you know that's the only thing they kept establishing about her character. The next line came from Poppy, where she and Nori are trying to determine what exactly Methdolf is. Because they know he's not a man, because men don't fall from the sky, or to their knowledge. He's not a dwarf, obviously. And Poppy asks, is he an elf? Or, sorry, Nori asks that question, not Poppy. And Poppy responds, wrong ears. And he's not handsome. Why are you commenting on if he's handsome or not? What does that have to do with any of the situation? And again, it shows that you're not really taking the situation seriously if you can make this kind of snide remark. And then it's also a question of, is Poppy so shallow that, oh, if he was handsome, she'd care more? Is that how she works? But then again, Poppy is just and pardon my language, she's a real bitch of a character when you start actually going into her and how she is. They try to make her all sweet like Sam, but she's really a very vile woman. The next line from Poppy is another expression of, it's either ghosts or goats, where she says, "Oh, great goats," or "great ghosts." I honestly could not tell which one it was, and while the subtitles claim it was goats, it did not sound like that. But again, that might just be the accent they're trying to do, because the Irish accents are extremely thick, and it makes it harder to understand them at times. And of course, she's saying this in response to the fact that Methdolf is rolling down the hill like a slapstick comedy. The final line of dialogue from this entire long sequence of them finding him in the crater, debating if they're going to take him out of the crater, debating if they're going to cover him or not, debating if they're going to get him in a cart or not, debating what they're going to do with him or not. It's an extremely long sequence. And Nori says, I know it sounds strange, but somehow I just know he's important. This is stupid in either one of two ways. One, I know it sounds strange, but somehow I know he's important. Yes, he's a man who fell from the sky. No, wonder he's important. Of course he's important. That's not something that happens. Or two, she's saying this for herself. That, well, I'm just like, there's something drawing me to him. I can't explain it. It's not because I care as a person. It's because, well, destiny says so. And I can feel it drawing me together. Again, neither one of those is very good for her character. We then cut away to Arondir and Bronwyn in the Southlands. They've run to the destroyed village that was done in an orc raid, which, again, I'm trying to keep myself limited to commentary, to the dialogue, but there's so much to comment on with how stupid the entire setup was. But Arondir looks at this destroyed ruin, and he says, this was no ground shake. Again, there's no reason why you could not have just said earthquake. Or just simple quake. Why a ground shake? They use normal words in Middle-earth. They use in a more archaic and high nobility tone, but there is no reason why they would not say earthquake or just a quake. Ground shake is just more of this thing where the writers clearly think, we need to make it sound more fantasy. So we can't use normal words at all. The next exchange was also from Bronwyn and Arondir, where Arondir has insisted that he's going to go down alone through the tunnel, and he's going to send Bronwyn running back to warn Hordern. Aside from the stupidity of the idea that he's going alone, he's also going to leave Bronwyn alone when there's potentially orcs on the prowl, He also isn't going to go and warn his comrades. He's going to chase this unknown menace instead. So this is not a smart move from a military man at all. And Bronwyn tells him, "You don't know what's down there." And Arondir's response is, "That is the reason I must go." What? I don't know what's down there, so I'm gonna go down there and find out what's down there. And then what? Run away? Fight it? What is the plan here? What is your goal exactly? You're just gonna chase it. But of course, the reason why we need him down there is so he can get captured. There's no logical reason for him to do this beyond, well, the plot needs him to be captured, so he has to put himself in this situation. It's a truly stupid moment. But we then leave, for goodness, that's already the second time we're doing this. We then leave and go all the way to Ostaneth Hill in Eregion. Or maybe it's just Eregion, because apparently they couldn't use the actual name of the actual city and capital of Eregion, so all of it's Eregion. And we're with Elton and Celeborn. They are in Celeborn's workshop or personal quarters, and Elton is looking at this hammer that's apparently from Feanor himself. And again, I'm going to refrain from asking how on earth such an artifact made it all this way. But Celeborn gives and says this statement that is supposed to be a running theme throughout the series about how true creation requires sacrifice. I'm not sure what he's trying to imply here. Because no, in Tolkien's world, true creation, as in what the Valar did through the Song of Iluvatar, did not require sacrifice. It was a song. Neither would elves see creation as as a means of requiring sacrifice. They see it as enhancement, as beautification of the natural world, of its progression. They did not see it as a sacrifice. And that goes for the same thing as well. Whether it be carving or forging, they see it simply as a transformation. It is not sacrificial in nature. The only one who to my recollection, would have said something or anything to this manner would be Feanor, because it recalls the jealousy and possessiveness he made about the Silmarils, where he said that I could not make them again, and it was a sacrifice to make to them, so you cannot take them from me. But this was a sign of his possessiveness. Saying true creation requires sacrifice leaves you open to this idea of, well, you sacrifice, so now you have claimant over it. Which again, an elf would not believe, especially one of Celebrimbor's status, who rejected Feanor and his behaviors, as well as his father. But again, this is also supposed to be some deep running theme throughout the show. This is one of those things where they think it's very profound, because they will repeat it a couple of times. But next, we get another massive character assassination for a character who isn't even in the show, beyond that very vague impression in Season 1. Because Celeborn starts telling Elton a story about how they say that Morgoth found the Silmarils so beautiful that, after he'd stolen them, for weeks he could do nothing but stare into their depths. It was only after one of his tears fell upon the jewels and he was faced with the evil of his own reflection that the reverie was finally broken. From that moment, he looked upon their light no more. If you know anything about Morgoth, this is the most laughable, ridiculous thing you could have possibly said about him. timeline-wise, this doesn't even make any sense. Morgoth, with Ungoliant, broke into Feanor's home, murdered his father on the doorstep, grabbed the Silmarils and all the other treasure within Feanor's halls, and fled Valinor. And once they were 24/7 racing it to the old fortress of Utumno that had been destroyed. And it was as they were approaching, Ungoliant turned on Feanor, on Morgoth. They fought, the Balrogs came, saved Morgoth, and then Morgoth turned the Silmarils into a crown, and that he wore right upon his head, with the light of the Silmarils blazing out from them. He did not stare at them. He was not bothered by his own evil. In fact, Morgoth would never be bothered by his own evil. He would reject the idea that you call me evil, then yes, I am evil because I am powerful. You call me evil because you are weaker than me, because you cannot stand how much greater I am than you. This idea that he would cry at all is ridiculous, and it assassinates his character entirely. This is not Morgoth. And again, the idea that he looked upon their light no more. The Silmarils were right on his head, shining bright. He could see their light just fine. The next line is also from Celeborn, where he's commenting on how he needs this this massive forge project done by spring. And he describes it as being able to birth a flame as hot as a dragon's tongue and yet as pure as starlight. I don't understand how these two things can be together. It feels like you took two different ideas and mashed them together when you should have stuck with one. It would have made sense if he had said able to birth a flame as hot as a dragon's tongue and stopped right there. Because that makes sense. That's a forge. But when would a forge as fire be as pure as starlight? How does that make any sense? Those things are not alike at all. Again, this last section should have been cut off and said as hot as a dragon's tongue. That's fine. That's enough. But no, you took it to another step. The next line is also from Celeborn, where he's talking about dwarves. And he says, they sculpt the rock with the respect of one who cares for an aged parent. This is not a metaphor or simile that an elf should ever use, because elves do not age. They do not care for aged parents. Their parents don't get old. And yet here he's talking about using this metaphor that would not occur to the elven race. There are certainly much better ones that they could have used. He could have even said they sculpt the rock as something as dumb as they sculpt the rock with the respect of an elf at a loom. And that would have been so much better than one who cares for an aged parent. Because that does not make sense for an elf to say whatsoever. The next line of dialogue is we're back with the dang Harfoots. And Nori's dad says this line: "A Harfoot without manners is as like to get far in life as a square wheel." Again, we're at least this one makes some level of sense, because okay, Harfoots migrate all the time, they have their carts, they need their wheels round. But again, what's with this obsession with wheels and being square? He said that too. There was a comment about this in the first episode, an offhanded thing. Why would any Harfoot have a square wheel? That makes no sense. Again, I understand what they're trying to say perfectly, and this is probably the one metaphor that has worked even a little bit so far. then the next line of dialogue is from Nori, and this is a phrase that I still, to this day, I have no clue what this is supposed to mean. Because she goes that anybody's head would be a bit higgledy-piggledy. Ooh. Somebody is going to have to explain to me what higgledy-piggledy is, because that is not something Tolkien's hobbits ever said. No one in Middle-earth ever said this. I have never even heard anyone say this in any other work that I've ever read. In literature, in film, in television, I've never heard higgledy-piggledy. If this was written by AI, this is a really weird AI to pull this out of a rabbit hat. And the next line is from Karen, where she's arrived. She's still swimming out in the ocean. She finds the raft that contains Simpron and the others, who they all look insane. There's even this one woman who has burns on her head, and her hair, whatever remains of her hair, is sticking out. And it was just, even then I was thinking, how on earth did you get like that on here? And the context from season 2's opening makes it even less sensible. But literally the first line that's Halbrand says was, "The tides of fate are flowing," which of course was followed up by the line, "Looks can be deceiving." And this immediately gave it away. He's talking about how the tides of fate are flowing in response to Karen meeting up with him. And then he mentions how looks can be deceiving. Yeah, okay, we found Sauron. We found him. It's obvious. The next line of dialogue came from the raft lady, and it's a very short one, where she just screams at Galadriel how, "You liar!" And then she shoved her back into the water. This is when the sea monster was attacking, and I wrote it down here. What exactly did she lie about you just met? Like, what on earth are you talking about? It would have made sense if she said something like, "You accursed elf." But no, she called Karen a liar. It's like, what did she lie about? You just met. She didn't lie about anything. The next line is from one of the men on the raft, who said, "Corsairs prowl these waters. Do you want to be skinned alive?" This is wrong again. Corsairs. Okay, obvious reference to the Corsairs of Umbar. Corsairs, however, do not exist. And they do not exist at all in this show, because it's been 2 seasons and never once has anyone on sea been assailed by Corsairs or pirates or whatever. This is just some really dumb dialogue that they should have noticed and removed. But again, it was probably in there because they wanted to use the idea of Corsairs. But there are no Corsairs in 2 seasons of this show. They don't exist. They have never run into Corsairs. And furthermore, how does this man know there are Corsairs? Because in season 2, we learn these are refugees from the Southlands, or somewhere near the Southlands. It's not very clear. But this is not a man who was native to the ocean, who has been on the ocean for a long time. How does he know there are Corsairs that prowl the waters and that they skin people alive? I don't know. We just need some tension. Moving on. It's back with Elton and Raw Dog, and they have plenty to say with each other. The first line I wrote down is from Raw Dog, or their version of Prince Durin IV. And this is when Elrond concedes the rock smashing contest. And Raw Dog goes, "A dog may bark at the moon, but he cannot bring it down." Again, I'm not sure what the problem is with this show, but they cannot seem to use metaphors that make sense for their people. because dogs barking at the moon, you gotta be on the surface for that to happen, and dwarves don't go on the surface, they live entirely underground. Furthermore, we don't see dogs around anywhere in Khazad-dûm. There are no dogs, so how does he know the dog might bark at the moon? In fact, why do dogs bark at the moon? I've never seen that happen. Has anyone seen dogs bark at the moon? I don't know. Makes no sense. It would have made more sense if he said a mountain goat can stamp its feet, but it can't bring down the mountain. That would have made more sense and been just as dumb. But again, it would have made more sense. The next phrase from Raw Dog is, to Elton, "You bet your feathery shirts it is." This is... his shirts are feathery? I mean, he has some thing on his shoulder with his cloak that looks like feathers, but his actual garments, his nightgown that he wears all the time, it isn't made of feathers. None of the elves have feathers in their clothing. So why is he saying your feathery shirts it is? And again, you couldn't come up with something else. You bet your life it is. You bet your ignorance it is. Something else, something that would hit more straight on than your feathery shirts. The next line was from Elton, and this was, again, more of that sweet, sweet irony to the lines, because Elton tells Raw Dog that, "I journey to see my friend whom I greatly missed." What a straight up lie. Elton just loves to lie. Because he did not make this journey to see his friend whom he greatly missed. He made this journey solely on behalf of Gilligold and Celeborn, because he needs the dwarves for work. In fact, Raw Dog would never have crossed Elton's mind if that had not happened. And of course, there's a reason why, but it's something to talk about when we get to that part in the future episodes. But for now, just content with yourself that the fact is Elton is straight lying here again. Then this is Raw Dog, where he's met with Deeza. They're sitting down for dinner. And Raw Dog is objecting to this. And he's going, "Aye, that's how it starts. And soon enough we're left with our thumbs in our eyes." Thumbs in your eyes? What? Why? Huh? Okay, besides that being extremely gruesome, you couldn't have said dust in our eyes? It's something that would have made, again, a bit more sense. You want to make metaphors, why aren't you doing miners and rocks and mountains and stuff? Why thumbs in your eyes? It could have just been it could have been just cave dust in your eyes or something like that. The next line is from Elton, where he comments on this tree, this Malorn tree, that he gave Raw Dog. And he goes, "Where there is love, it is never truly dark." And this is a line that is so sappy. It lacks any of the elegance of Tolkien's means of expressing such a thought. And it's just, this is so cheesy and on the nose that it's just gross. It just made me feel nauseous. The final line was from Raw Dog, and this, I hope I don't need to explain why this is bad, because Raw Dog goes, "Sod it, sit down." I remember when I was watching the Battle of the Five Armies from the Hobbit trilogy, and when they had Dane Ironfoot say "sod off," I was mortified, because sod it or sod off, Tolkien's characters do not swear like this. This is just Hollywood leaning into them being Scottish and using a very modern phrase. But dwarves should never be swearing like this. It's not who they are. and it's certainly inappropriate to Tolkien's world. The next line of dialogue is jumping all the way back to the ocean, where you have Simpron and Karen talking with each other. And again, the massive exchange they had, there was obviously so much more I could take, but I was losing my attention really quickly. So I only wrote down 2 lines for this point. And this is Simpron who goes, "You don't have the look of someone to whom things happen to by accident." It's just a very clunky line. I have no idea how Vickers was able to deliver this line appropriately, because it is so clunky. You don't have the look of someone to whom things happen to by accident. And I'm not really sure how he's supposed to be able to discern this. He's just incredibly discerning. So discerning that he can figure out, oh, Galadriel's a stowaway, she's a fugitive. And it couldn't just be that she was stranded by accident. And Karen's response is a very strange one, because she's talking about the orcs, and she says, "I have pursued this foe since before the first sunrise bloodied the skies." I don't know any elf who would compare the first sunrise to it being blooding the skies. And furthermore, no, she hasn't. Because, again, sun and moon came up much longer. She's pursuing Sauron in this case. That's her goal, remember. Her goal is Sauron. If for something to take place where the first sunrise bloodied the skies, it would be Morgoth. Because she was not pursuing Sauron before the sun came up. The sun came up after Morgoth, of course, murdered Feanor, the first kinslaying happened, and all of that. But Galadriel, even in this show, was not pursuing Sauron before the first sunrise. That's a straight up lie. And again, saying the sunrise bloodied the skies is not a metaphor or comparison an elf would make. The next lines of dialogue are between Bronwyn and Waldreg, the gross tavern owner who handles meat without even wearing a shirt. And it's just disgusting. And she's telling the people that it was as if the ground had swallowed up the people of Hordern like flies. Again, you could have just said it was as if the ground had swallowed up the people of Hordern. I don't know what you mean by like flies. I feel like I have seen that in literature before, but it's never been something that makes sense to me, because I know frogs swallow up flies, but she's not talking about she's not thinking about frogs here at all. It could just be as if the ground swallowed up the people of Hordern, and that's it. I don't understand the like flies part. Again, the show is obsessed with putting similes and metaphors everywhere, because they think, well, Tolkien used similes and metaphors, obviously, so we have to use them. Even though Tolkien used them much more intelligently, and B, he didn't use them nearly as prolifically as everyone thinks he did. It's simply a faux Shakespearean, faux fantasy, something that amateurs do. Which, considering these writers and the showrunners, yeah, that makes perfect sense, that this is amateur hour. Waldreg's next 2 lines of dialogue, though, are certainly something, because in response to this, Waldreg says, "The ground here is tetchy, always has been." Tetchy is, again, a word I have never seen used in Tolkien's world. I have never heard anyone use anywhere else, for that matter. And I sincerely doubt anybody on the writing staff knew what it was, because I'm pretty sure this script was written by an AI. But again, the ground here is Tetchy, always has been. He's just completely dismissing this idea. And the thing, though, is he's not even denying what happened. He's saying, oh, yeah, sure, the ground broke and swallowed those down. The ground is Tetchy. Yeah, it was inevitable that was going to happen. He's not reacting appropriately to what she said. If he's supposed to be trying to deny it, then he would not say that. He would say what he says in a little while, actually, that, well, you're just, I don't know, you're probably just making this up to hide the fact that you went off with your elf lover or something, or trying to cause a panic here. Anything other than this, which is him essentially admitting, yeah, I believe you. I believe this happened. But it's not alarming at all. And the second line of dialogue, which was I have something truly special, because Waldreg says, without proof or pudding, that is all. And I'm tempted to quote Charlie Hopkinson here, where it's just, so if I bring you some pudding, you'll believe me? What? Without proof or pudding? What? No one talks like this. This is not something anyone would say in the medieval era or the modern era, or any era for that matter. This is not something a human would say. Especially because, again, he's flip-flopped here. First, he was trying to deny and dismiss what happened. Then he's like, well, I don't believe you. Then it's like, no, I believe you, I just don't care. Which one is it? The next line of dialogue is from Karen and Simran, and this is taking place with the big storm. And this was such a strange thing for Karen to shout, because it's so specific wording. They're in the storm, and she yells out to Simran, bind yourself to me. She's holding out her hand to grab him. She isn't saying, take my hand. She isn't saying, tie yourself to the mast. No, she says, bind yourself to me. This is like the Methdolf meteor, the fire not being hot. This is a line that is purely done for setup, because they want to repeat this motif, this idea of Karen and Simran binding themselves together. Simran will even echo it in the final episode, binding yourself to me. But it's such an unnatural thing to say in this situation, and it doesn't make any sense, because she isn't saying, tie yourself to me, and you'll survive the storm. It should be, take my hand so I can pull you up. That's what she's supposed to be saying in this moment. But no, it's bind yourself to me, which is, again, it's a forced line of dialogue. The penultimate line from the episode 2 that I wrote down is coming from Sadek, the Harfoot, the murder hobo elder. And he goes, the next migration is coming and everything will be gone. 3 rabbits to the moon. If you've listened to anyone who goes into any detail with the show, you know the show does not bother to give any real estimates of time. It rarely ever does this. This is one of the few times where it's attempted to explain time, the passage of time, but it's in a way that you have no clue what this means. What is 3 rabbits to the moon? Like, what on earth is a rabbit as in a measurement of time? What is that? And I can't tell you, because no one explains it. No one gives an equivalent. No one explains what the rabbit is. No one remarks, all right, it's been 3 sunsets, 3 rabbits. No one, like, what is a rabbit? Is it a day, an hour, a week? I don't know. And the final line of dialogue from episode 2 came from King Durin III, or as I prefer to call him, King Dummin. And he says to his son, You've always had sandstone in your granite as far as the elves are concerned. Oop, let me change that quickly. There we go. So he says, how has Raw Dog had sandstone in your granite as far as the elves concerned? He hasn't spoken with Elton in 20 years. What does that mean? You've always had sandstone in your granite. Now, I agree with the king that Raw Dog is way too trusting of Elton in this situation. He should be very suspicious. He should not have bought Elton's apology whatsoever. But I don't understand where the king is coming from. That, oh, you've always had a soft spot for the elves. After 20 years, not interacting with one elf? Because Raw Dog does not have a relationship with the elves. He has a relationship with Elton, and Elton alone. It should have been, you've always had sandstone in your granite as far as Elton is concerned. And that would have made sense. But no, he's applying it to all elves in general. And we know fully well, Raw Dog does not trust or care for all elves in general. It's just Elton. But with that line, we bring episode 2 to a conclusion.